This week felt like one of those moments where you remember the system isn't just watching, it's logging. And yeah, that's normal. If you use any government system, of course, there are audit logs and records. The part that isn't normal is when the log stops being boring security hygiene and becomes a stage prop. Like, here's your clicks, Congressman. Let's do a little public humiliation just to keep everyone else curious. And once that move works once, it's not about the person who gets singled out. It's about teaching everyone else what curiosity costs. Welcome to Shrink the Nation. Let's go.
This is Shrink the Nation, a podcast for thoughtful, informed adults, preferably holding a drink and definitely holding a thought. The views expressed here are ours alone. They do not represent our employers, institutions, licensing boards, government agencies, bourbon distilleries, or most emphatically, our families. They've been very clear about that. This show is for education and entertainment only. Nothing you hear is medical, psychiatric, legal, or professional advice. We're clinicians, not your clinicians. If something we say stirs you up, that's not a crisis, that's a journal entry, or an email sent politely. We're here to challenge ideas, not diagnose strangers on the internet. And if you are in real distress, please reach out to a professional who can actually help you.
Hey, I'm David. I'm a board certified psychiatrist and I have over 20 years of military experience. Today, I am in this early morning that we are recording, drinking yet another enormous cup of Americano. I believe 4 Americanos fit in this cup.
Holy shit.
It is shaped like a grenade and should be a good talk.
Yeah, so David's doing like 320 milligrams of caffeine right now. And I'm Rob. I've got 30 years in the military and I'm a board certified psychiatrist. And I'm excited about today's episode.
I think I'm excited because I've already drank like 2 of the Americanos that fit in this cup.
Holy shit. So you're up in the 600 milligram
Yeah,
of
I'm good.
caffeine. Me too.
I'm so excited that I'm shaking. Look
Right.
at this excitement in my hands. You can tell.
Yeah, no bourbon today, just coffee.
So something interesting happened this last week that I do think is worth talking about. And I would absolutely love to get your take, Rob. There was a contentious hearing on Capitol Hill where the Attorney General Pam Bondi was holding a piece of paper that said Jayapal Pramila search history. So Pramila Jayapal is Washington State Democrat. She had actually gone to the Department of Justice and was reviewing unredacted Epstein files. And before this hearing, apparently, Pam Bondi was given a list of everything she had looked at. What Representative Jayapal had said was that the DOJ is spying on us. That's not fully accurate, I think. So I want to be fair. We should totally expect that if somebody were to go into the Department of Justice and use one of their computers, that absolutely everything that they're doing on that computer is logged. That is well within normal, and anybody who is shocked by this, I'm sorry, but if you go into a government system and use it, they know what you're doing. So just lay low on the porn, all right? Actually, when I was in the Navy, I was in IT. That's one of the things that I would have to do is comb through the search logs on people's internet and basically cut people off the internet when they were doing things they weren't supposed to be doing on a ship in the middle of the ocean.
Sure.
On our shared 256 kbps connection. So, and I will tell you, my God, it wasn't just that people were looking at porn because, my God, you get 250 sailors on a ship in the middle of the ocean for a month.
Yeah.
People are going to be looking at porn. It was the kind of porn that they were looking at.
Get
that
some
really,
weird porn.
Oh my God, we got some weird porn, weird searches. Anyway, and that was back in the early 2000s. So just be aware. Yes, if you're on a system, it's going to go to audit logs. What is weird about this, or interesting, was that it was then printed out, handed to Pam Bondi before a hearing, presumably, I don't know, maybe so that she's aware of the things that she's going to be asked about on the Epstein files. But what it looks like is that she might be using that as an offensive more than defensive.
I think the entire hearing was offensive rather than defensive. In theory, these kind of hearings are information-based. We need to gather additional information from a subject matter expert. And this didn't feel quite like that. It was offensive from the jump. It was an attack rather than an information sharing. It was interesting. She has a previous rather contentious hearing that was similar. This was not unpredictable. But what it is striking to me is that it does diverge from history, from the norm of these kinds of hearings, when usually it's like we have questions, give us answers. And this was an attack from the jump. And I am not surprised even a little bit that something like this, search history, was in her possession because it was an attack. And when you're attacking, you need all the information you can have.
Psychologically, though, looking at it, there was an offensive piece to it, dispute or not. I mean, I think the DOJ would say we wanted her to be prepared for whatever questions she was going to receive. If you're going to go into a congressional hearing, I hope I never have to, because you're going to get
God.
grilled and you're going to get, yeah, lots of gotcha type stuff from whatever side decides they want to do that. But what it struck me as more than an offensive because there wasn't much about somebody's search history on the files that you could really weaponize. I mean, the truth is that they were viewing unredacted files that the DOJ had redacted. So, of course, they're going to be searching around looking for dirt. What it struck me as more, though, wasn't really as much the ability to make it offensive. It was a message. Psychologically, what does it do to anybody who is the ability to view these files when they are well aware that not only are you being audited and logged, but that that information is going to be used publicly against you if you bring up something. I think that's where it interests me.
It was a threat.
Yeah, it's a threat. It is. It's a shot across the bow to anybody else who is considering doing that. We're going to be watching everything you do, every letter that you type. We're going to know it, exactly what you're looking at. We're going to print it out and we're going to let her come at you with that information.
If you're in a legal situation in which an expert is testifying to say this person was sane at the commission of the crime, when you can't argue against that, you argue against what are their credentials? What's their history? What were their grades in medical school? When they boarded, how did they do? And you argue against their background rather than the information. The focus ends up becoming these individuals. So what did they search? What were they looking for? Is anything questionable? Is anything going to embarrass them? It's a humiliation tactic. It's to make people feel scrutinized in a way that they end up withdrawing because they don't want to be embarrassed. Withdraw to a self protective zone. And that's what the goal was, at least.
It wasn't so much about what Representative Jayapal was looking at. That offensive was there to let everybody else know. That's the point. When I don't have much else, I'm going to go after you, but not because I want you. I don't want your head. What I want is I want everyone else to stop fucking doing the thing that you did. And I want them to know that I can do this. That's what that was. Because she didn't bring up anything that would be embarrassing for that person. It was a matter of letting everyone else know, stay out of our stuff, or we're going to come after you because we have the ability. It does very much have a chilling effect. It's very difficult to stand up to that type of psychological warfare. We all act in ways that is impacted by our knowledge of the environment. And so when you see this, you might be thinking, oh, that's not going to stop anybody from looking. Well, don't be so sure that it won't be in the back of their mind if they are deciding to look. And so it's going to change their behaviors. A weird example of that is something that drug companies have known for ever and a day, which was if they go into the community with their drug reps and they talk about a drug, the docs who hear that are much more likely to prescribe those particular drugs than they would have otherwise. That's the reason. Doctors aren't stupid. It's because they are just as
Human?
psychologically vulnerable as every other human. And so when something is in your mind, whether intentionally or non intentionally, you're going to respond to it. It's just something that you're going to do.
Her approach switches the terrain. She was on the defensive. They failed to meet the law. They didn't produce these records in the time frame that was required by the law that was passed by the Congress. She shifted it to a terrain that put these lawmakers on the defensive. That in and of itself shifts the conversation dramatically. And here we are talking about it. We have shot past the fact that they failed to do what the law was required. And what they ended up doing was submitting a set of records that exposed some of the victims in a very compromised way. They redacted a certain subset of individuals. Question is, did they deserve to be redacted? I don't know. They were implicated without being guilty in the court of law. Were they guilty? They did some bad shit. And then they exposed some individuals that leave it ambiguous as to the extent of their guilt. They just made bad choices. They were involved. But she flipped the script. She made it an attack on the questioners. And psychologically, I think everyone can identify with this. Like, you can remember being a kid and being busted for something you've done. And rather than taking responsibility, rather than providing the information, you go on the attack with your parents, that you make it their problem, their issue, that the question in and of itself is questionable. She does it well. Also, interestingly, I think her performance was for an audience of one. She needed to appear the way she did for one singular individual.
Yeah, and I think the downstream effects, though, are to prevent other people from even asking the questions.
Absolutely.
Sending a message, come after me, and I'm going to come after you 10 times harder. There will be an impact. What that is, I don't know, but I imagine that there are probably some Congress people who are vulnerable in their districts or anywhere else who are less likely to ask the hard questions that they otherwise may have asked because of this.
I think it'll just shift their browsing behaviors.
Mhm.
They're going to use their phone, they're going to use their private internet.
But they won't be able to look through those unredacted files without going into the DOJ and looking at them. I think that's the point.
That's a good point.
We have every piece of information about what you do when you're here. The only way you're going to be able to look at this stuff is to come here and do it. This is just weaponizing a standard thing that the government does because they have to, but it's just never weaponized. I mean, it would be like me going to the person looking at horse porn and saying, listen, buddy, I'm going to tell everybody that you did this.
Stop looking at horse porn.
You shouldn't look at horse porn. But when you're searching it out, my job wasn't to go around to everybody on the ship and say, guess who's looking at horse porn? The number will surprise you.
But you did. I
Totally did. Yeah, no, I totally did. I mean, I had the nicest,
Totally.
I had the nicest
Like,
rack on the, yeah.
All right. Chief so-and-so's looking at horse porn.
It was going all the way to the top, Robbie. Let me tell you the conspiracy. Oh, but that's just it. It's the chilling effect. It's the ability to get other people to not behave in a certain way by threatening one other person publicly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like beating the hell out of your one kid to get your other kid to stop smoking.
No, it reminds
Don't
me
do
of,
that. Don't do
well, when my kid would have folks stay over, spend the night, and they'd be misbehaving. And I'd yell at my child to send out a message to everyone else, to all the other kids. That's kind of what it reminded me of, that she was sending a message. And that message was chilling to those who all of a sudden was like, oh shit, I've searched some crazy shit on the internet and they know. They now know. And she effectively used a tool that changed the narrative. This isn't part of the way democracies are supposed to work. There's this sense in democracy that everyone's going to be a reasonable agent, that they're going to respond almost apersonally, that everyone's going to just give the information. She took control of the narrative. There was a narrative dominance. It was aggressive. It was an attack. It wasn't an exchange of information. It's one of those stories that resonates with me. I can't stop thinking about her performance, but there's nothing to be said about it because it was so aggressive that where do you go from there? And that was the point. The point was to be so over the top, so inflammatory that there's nothing to be said. But it also ends up being that you didn't share any information. You didn't actually expose yourself at all. You were completely defended to the point that we have nothing to say about it other than that, yeah, it was ridiculous. That anyone that watched it would probably walk away thinking, holy shit, this extends beyond what normal humans do. But what we forget is that there was no vulnerability. And that's the nature of what those hearings are. It's supposed to be vulnerable. It's supposed to be, we're trying to get to the bottom of something. And to get to the bottom of something, you have to be vulnerable.
No, you make a good point. Actually, I think to add a layer to it then is
I'm glad
that
I make a good point occasionally.
you usually do. I think I'm usually just slow to the party, which is fine. I've gotten comfortable with that part of myself.
You're dumb as shit.
Yeah, what it's got me thinking is that the chilling effect then applies to more than just don't come and look at our shit. It's stop dragging me in here because you're going to get nothing out of me. That actually might be a much more powerful message when the attorney general has essentially put themselves out there as such a hostile witness that nothing that I do will I ever concede an
Yeah.
inch of ground. In fact, I'll take more ground if you ask me. I'm going to come prepared. I'm going to come with ammunition. It's going to be personal. It's going to be deep. And I'm going to come after you. So drag me into another hearing and expect more of this, which
Yes.
is an even bigger chilling effect when you can't get the head of the DOJ to answer any questions, especially in this environment where the DOJ is very much being weaponized to whatever way they want.
It shifts the vulnerability. For our government to work, there are checks and balances. And the checks require that there's a certain vulnerability to those engaged in whatever behavior. Is it morally correct? Is it legally correct? And what she effectively did was shift the vulnerability back to the questioner. The questioner, in our government at least, should have safety to ask the question. And she shifted it psychologically. That's dangerous to our democracy. I won't call it a superb book, but there is a book that references psychological safety in organizations. It's a leadership book. And in order to be the best organization that you can be, your people have to have psychological safety. They have to have the sense that they can pose questions, even when they're dumb ones, bad questions, but they have to feel safe that they're not going to be chastised for asking the question, because every once in a while, there's going to be a good question that makes the organization better. And what she did was flip the script in a way that the questioners can't ask questions because now they feel threatened by their search history, by the fact that they then have to endure an attack. And that's dangerous. That's not how democracy is supposed to work.
It erases accountability. It basically allows you to do whatever you want because you're never going to have to face the consequences or have to explain yourself. When somebody in power, especially in a democracy, is no longer accountable for their behavior, then the gloves are off. Do whatever you want. It is a dangerous place.
Yeah, I can do whatever I want and you can't ask me questions about it. That is an authoritarian stance. This administration certainly leans authoritarian, and this is one step further into the authoritarian world.
You know what I've been thinking about a lot lately too? We talk a lot about democracy. We talk a lot about this is what the norms were. This is how the country has always functioned along those lines. And this concern about sliding towards a more authoritarian perspective. What I end up thinking a lot about is that there's a pretty healthy segment of our population, at least the voting population, that's all for it. They're very happy with moving towards this authoritarian perspective. And you see that reflected in polls. Now, it is whittling down with various approval ratings, with different questions being asked. It's less than it was, but it certainly still exists. It's, somewhere in this 50 to 75% of Republicans are okay with these behaviors. Now, whether they identify them as being authoritarian, that's a good question. I don't know. And it is less than it was because it was higher than that. When you break it down to the Republican versus Democrat versus independent, it's pretty high. Over half of Republicans are saying, yep, we want this. We're good with it. That's troubling.
It is. The interesting thing about democracy is that democratic stance requires a high level of psychological health. That democracy means that every decision is going to be scrutinized. And that's an uncomfortable place. Like for our tens of listeners, think about what it's like that every decision you make goes to committee. It's going to be scrutinized. It's going to be thought about. It's going to be questioned. We all make decisions that in retrospect, we're not proud of, we're not comfortable with. And we also don't want it to be pushed in our face. Most decisions, they don't need to be pushed in your face. Humiliation is a powerful human feeling. In word according to Rob, humiliation is actually the core human emotion, the absolute core. Don't make me question myself, who I am, what I do. It's core to us, and it's the most vulnerable place. And democracy absolutely requires tolerance for humiliation. What we're seeing at this point is that this administration can't tolerate humiliation. They can't tolerate being questioned. They can't tolerate anyone thinking about their thought process, the logic behind it, etc. Rather than tolerating humiliation, they go and they attack. That's not a leadership position. That's not a position of strength. Strength comes from being confident in the thought process behind your decisions. Going on the attack implies a very tentative, questionable background to the decision-making process. I often say this in my life, is that if my decisions can't tolerate dissension, then they're bad decisions. This is purely from a leadership standpoint. If I can't accept someone disagrees with me, then ultimately, then I have to go backwards and question my decision to begin with, because it was probably based on something that was shaky ground. And all we're seeing is shaky ground defense.
What you got me thinking about, it's really meta, actually,
It
when you
is.
talk about this, because what has been the norm throughout our entire history was that there is this, we'll call it a chilling effect, but it's the second order effect of being constantly scrutinized shapes the decision-making process to where you are involving expertise. So a typical president will surround themselves with true experts who may agree with them, but at least experts in their field when making policy decisions. They carefully consider policy. They carefully consider the downstream effects of whatever the decisions are going to be, because they know that they're going to be scrutinized. And they want to make sure that whenever they implement a policy, that that policy is going to have at least mostly beneficial effect for all the constituents. And when you're the president of the United States, that means everybody.
Everyone.
But they also know they're going to be scrutinized positively and negatively. But what you're aiming for is that once you get past that, there will be benefit. You want to make sure that what I'm doing is ultimately going to lead in that direction in a positive way. But what we're seeing that is so different is that intolerance of critique, rather than having that downstream effect of careful consideration for policies, it has become a complete ignoring of the criticism, which is really interesting. It's shamelessness,
Shameless.
but really it's a method of dealing with the criticism that doesn't require self-reflection, which is what most presidents would do. Potentially even change their perspective, because you don't always know what a policy is going to do. But to be able to come back and say, I did that wrong.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, like we saw this with Biden as well, to some extent, with some of his policies, but not all of them. It's really, really fascinating, because what it looks like is build yourself an echo chamber where all you're going to get is positive feedback for the decisions that you're making, even when the people, a majority of them, aren't liking it. And then if you do hear those numbers, the response is, I don't trust those. I don't think they're real.
The nature of democracy requires a healthy psychological profile. I mean, it assumes a healthy psychological profile.
A
Now,
strong ego. It's a strong ego,
a
right?
strong
It's
ego.
It's the
Yeah,
ability to tolerate dissension. And
absolutely.
we already know that there is a fragile ego, by
Deeply.
own admission, driving
Yes.
the ship.
By his words. By
Yeah.
his words. He said
Yeah.
this. The nature of democracy, like our founding fathers, when they built this, they were assuming a strong ego, a healthy psychological profile. Now, they also built in some rules that sort of contained the healthy psychological profile. At this time, we're not even seeing policy. There is no policy. The policy is what supports an ego of this administration. That is the closest thing to policy that we're seeing right now. There is not any prevailing idea of what is right, what is good. There is ever shifting from moment to moment, really. What supports the ego behind this. We feel this. Our tens of listeners, and maybe fives of listeners at this point. Who knows? We're probably losing listeners.
We have a healthy tens for sure.
Healthy tens of listeners. So to our healthy tens of listeners, they feel the angst. They feel this. This is the anxiety that we're all feeling, is that there is no prevailing policy. There is no sense that there is a consistency across the board. This is ever changing moment to moment based on an ego, singular, one ego. And that makes it challenging for the rest of us.
I want to clarify though, the core is one ego, but when you stretch out a little bit more to the exterior, what you have are simplistic, non-nuanced ideas that originated at the core and then shoot out to these individual sub-leaders whose role from their own perspective is to appease the core. And their only guidance was that simple version of policy of something. Like you see this with DHS. You have a leader of DHS.
We're in the midst of a DHS shutdown.
Yes, partially because of that, right? But you have DHS, a leader whose perspective was one thing, was given one direction: deport 1 million people a year. Now, the Department of Homeland Security does a hell of a lot more than ICE and CBP.
They
They do a hell of a lot more. But the focus has been on this one task. And because of the fragility of the ego that exists at the core, there's this constant pressure at all the different departmental heads to appease and to gain attention, because you know that based off of past experience, that if you're not garnering positive attention, that you are vulnerable. But because the policy is just very simplistic, non-nuanced thing, your actions are to just garner attention from that and to just try to appease it at all costs. And so whenever you're on the news, and you're going to be on the news a lot, but you can't say anything that's going to upset the ego, even if it's a bald-faced lie, even if it is completely fabricated, even if there is not even enough information to have an opinion. You just say the thing that's going to appease the ego and endure the fallout, because you know that you are more vulnerable from the core than anything else.
That's the fragility of what we're witnessing. I'm not going to say that every president has been psychologically patent. They haven't. And in fact, the drive to become president, to be the leader of this nation, probably at its core comes from something that is not entirely psychologically healthy. Now, we need leaders, but leadership in and of itself is underlying it. What we're seeing at this point is a fragility at that leadership position that is unique. It's ridiculously unique, in fact. It is that everything they do, everything that we're seeing is so tied to that ego structure, to that fragility, that it defies the consistency that is required in democracy, that's required in governance. History has taught us is that we need consistent policy, an idea. Now, whether that idea is good, bad, indifferent, that plays out over time. But we need an idea that everything falls behind, that all of it is consistent. And yes, these decisions are made and then people have to defend them in order to convey to the populace that there's an idea behind this. There is a policy that drives this. And we all feel it. We feel it in our bones, the instability of an ego. The interesting thing to me is we feel it on such a level that we actually end up identifying with it. And then we don't question it because we get it. We understand fragility. We're not saying we expect better. We're just accepting it because we feel it in our bones, at our core. We understand why this administration, this president, is so fragile.
Can't say that I'm not questioning it because I'm not surprised by it, but I think when
we're not surprised by it. Maybe that's it.
Yeah, we're not surprised by it. When you think about the fact that a good leader is not necessarily a good technician, and actually
Shouldn't be.
rarely is a good leader a good technician. But with that, a really good leader understands how to appropriately delegate authority, appropriately get a team to function,
Yes.
but also understands that as a leader, you are fallible. You will make mistakes. You will sometimes make bad choices, but a good leader surrounds themselves with people that can perform and perform well, knowing that this leader does not appear to believe that anything said, done, or otherwise by this leader is wrong. Already shows that there would be poor leadership. Now, when we were watching him select the technicians that he would be leading, I think it was also pretty clear that there was no intention of having good technicians. It was about appeasing the leader. So, can you really say that you're surprised that this is the way things are going now? That the wheels on this particular vehicle are wobbly and coming off when the technicians don't know how to put on wheels, you know?
One of the reasons that we end up doing this, and one of the reasons I was interested in doing this, is that you're a smart guy and you put words to things that I sometimes can't. And you just nailed it that leadership isn't being a technician, it's identifying technicians that can do the job that you can't do individually, but that in total you make happen. That is by definition leadership. And this administration has not identified technicians that can do the job. They have identified individuals that can feed the ego. And we're getting the results that is commensurate with that. That when you're feeding the ego, you're not doing the job. Our tens of listeners can identify with this. In those moments when they are ego driven, they're probably not doing the job that they need to do in their lives. They're not taking care of the kids. They're not doing their work. And feeding the ego temporarily feels good. It feels fine. I'm not questioning myself. I don't need to question myself. But in the scope of time, which our tens of listeners can identify with because they've lived lives, that ends up being a very hollow way to approach it. That they actually end up feeling better when they're doing the fucking job, when they're actually doing the work, when they're taking care of the kids and they're taking care of their responsibilities and they're taking care of their life, when they're contributing. That's when they actually feel good. When they are defending their ego, they don't. They feel hollow. I'm now telling our tens of listeners what they feel. That's ego driven for me. And I apologize to our tens of listeners that I've just, in a very ego driven way, told you how you feel.
A very real world example that any parent can truly understand. And really, honestly, anybody who's been a child, which hopefully is
All of
everybody,
us.
as a parent, when you're really busy and you tell a younger child, clean your room, and because
And they don't.
you have other shit to do.
Yeah.
Well, what's the kid gonna do? Because the child doesn't know how to clean their room. I mean, really, the first time they don't know how to clean their room. They know what a clean room looks like, but they don't know how it got there. And so what does the child do? They take all their shit and they throw it under the bed. They loosely they loosely throw their comforter on top of the bed and
Yeah.
it looks like garbage. And maybe there's fucking stuffed animal, like it's just lumpy.
Yeah.
And they go, "Look, mom, look,
It's
dad,
clean.
I cleaned my room." And
Yeah.
they're excited because they feel like they did a great job.
Yeah.
But you made an error because you didn't show them how to clean a room properly. And frankly, when kids are young, they don't have the capacity to have the patience and the organizational skills to do it properly. But you expected them. You expected them to do it. And because they just wanted to appease your ego, they did their best. And then what happens? They make a fucking mess of it. And it actually ends up taking you longer to
Or an
go in and clean up.
organized mess.
Yeah. But that's what this is. You have this concept of what you want. They do not, because it's a loose concept. It's too simple. You didn't say, I want you to put all your books away on the shelves properly. I want you to put all your stuffed animals I want you to you didn't tell them that. because you didn't have that concept in your mind. All you knew was, I want the room clean, go do it. So that's what we're seeing this room that has been not properly cleaned because your child doesn't know how to clean it. A normal reaction would be to either go in and clean it yourself, which if you don't have time, you give specific direction. Okay, go get all your shit out from under your bed, and I want you to put your toys on the shelf where they belong, and so on and so forth. What we're seeing from this administration, though, is something very different. It's not even looking at the room. It's basically saying, did you clean your room, buddy? Sure did. Okay, awesome. Well done. Good job. Keep it up. If we project this forward, I mean, it's only been a year, and what we have is a fucking mess of a room that is being said is clean, and we haven't fixed anything. So it's going to only get worse because now the child is getting complacent and comfortable with their quote unquote ability to clean a room. And so we're going to have ants. That's what's going to happen, Robbie. We're going to have ants. We're going to have ants in DHS. It's going to be everywhere because we're just saying good job when a good job has not been done. In fact, a terrible job has been done and things are worse. We project this forward 3 years, whoever the next administration is, Republican, Democrat, Green, whatever the fuck, what they're going to have is a whole bunch of rooms that are just in shambles. That's what we're going to have.
Yeah, organized chaos is what we have. It's a lovely analogy, actually. The sense of cleanliness, the sense of organization is driven by a singular individual. They're saying, all right, that's good enough. Let me actually dig in just a little deeper. It's not good enough, but it's good enough for this ego. And you're right. The next administration, which hilariously, you said the Green Party, or started to. Hilariously. Yeah. That's who's going to be in the next.
Being nice, yeah.
That's who's going to win. You're right. You're right.
Could be.
Could be.
Didn't David Duke endorse the Green Party candidate this last time?
I think he did.
Yeah. So, maybe.
David fucking Duke. Put that on your poster, folks. David Duke
endorsed
says,
by David Duke.
Oh.
Thank you, sir. No, really, but
I wish you hadn't endorsed me.
Yeah. I mean, I honestly, that's what if you were not Green Party, you'd probably just put that on. The other guy was endorsed by David Duke. Put that on yours. Just remember when you're going to vote.
Which strikes me as like how much douchebaggery has to be involved in thinking you're important enough to endorse anyone.
In all fairness, he did endorse Trump the first time he ran. He said the reason he didn't endorse Trump the second time was because Trump was in the pocket of Israel or some shit like that. Like that was his only reason for not endorsing him. Like that was his, but he otherwise would have endorsed him.
Trump's close with anyone. He's not close with a single individual.
But okay, so the analogy though is like when your other kid is saying, their room's not clean. It's not clean. And you're like, shut the fuck up. Shut up. It is clean. He told me it was clean. All is good. I'm taking it. That's where we're at. Is this, I told him to do it. He said he did it. Awesome. He did exactly what I said. We're all good. Where the other kid's like, but wait, my room is clean. Shut up, Karen. You hater. I've got your search logs. You want to talk about your search logs there, Karen?
Well, this is the fascinating thing about this show. I'll call it a show. I don't know what else to call it. The thing we do. We started out with a very limited, and here we have expanded beyond that, which I find fascinating and wonderful at the same time. Yeah, shut up, Karen. Maybe that should be our new catchphrase for us, is that, we end up expanding these things so far beyond what they are. Maybe we're being Karens. Maybe.
All right, let's get to our prescriptions so that we can end this nightmare.
Put a bullet in this one. Yeah.
I'm going to call this one the audit log candle. So you're going to light a candle for every time somebody turns a boring administrative tool like audit logs into a dominance performance, and then blow it out when you feel your shoulders drop 2 millimeters. You're not going to fix anything, but you are noticing that there's an incentive structure without getting your nervous system too involved.
I'm going to say Congress must treat, quote unquote, victims in the room as humans and not props. We didn't talk about this that much in this episode, but the thing that struck me about the Pam Bondi hearing was that these humans who were mistreated, were abused, were treated as props, that they were a thing that the conversation ended up revolving around, but weren't people. So dragging survivors into gotcha moments is moral theater. So refusing to acknowledge them as humans, as people who experience something negative is just wrong. So you got to pick a lane. You're either going to be accountable or it's going to be spectacle. And we tend to choose spectacle.
Yeah. And it is unfortunate, but it also feels like a purposeful move by everybody. When you had those survivors sitting there being used as props, it was pretty clear that Bondi had no intention of acknowledging the humanity of those people. And what she was able to do was drag the Congress people out of that as well.
Which actually brings me to an additional prescription that the public has to quit rewarding contempt as strength. She approached this with contempt. And when a, washed up loser lawyer becomes the headline, the institution's lost. You can't rebuild trust with contempt. And that's all that was demonstrated in this hearing was contempt for the institutions of democracy.
And finally, if you tell your kids to clean their room and they don't know how, realize they want to appease you. So just give them some solid instructions so that they know how to clean their room, and you will be much more appeased than, did you clean your room, buddy? Sure did. All right. And then later you have to deal with ants.
No ants, folks. For our tens of listeners, avoid the ants.
I think that pretty much sums it up for today. Want to thank everybody for sticking around. What we want to ask is that you go to our website, sign up for our mailing list to be able to get any new information that we have as soon as possible. That'd be a good place to go. Go up and hit our socials, subscribe, like, share. Please do. We would love for our tens of listeners to become hundreds of listeners and maybe even thousands at some point. We know that our listeners are quite intelligent, thoughtful, and we want to just see if we can get more people to listen to us and send us some messages on how that's good and what's not, and how you want us to move things forward from here. Other than that, thanks so much.
You summed it up beautifully.
All right, well, let's cue up that music, and we are out.